Hello everyone, welcome back. So we are doing another book review. I had actually planned on doing this later in the month, and then I decided we're gonna do it now. So this is the Pagan Book of Living and Dying, Practical Rituals, Prayers, Blessings, and Meditations on Crossing Over by Starhawk, and then a little bit from M. Maca Nightmare, I might be mispronouncing that, and the Reclaiming Collective. So this book, I am in the minority for. So I initially bought this book in 2019, shortly after we had buried my mother-in-law. And I was trying to process and grieve because this was the first kind of complicated death that I had dealt with. The rest, it was handled. I really didn't have anything to do with the planning process and like a lot of like the intimate details of dealing with a death. And I just was like, there's gotta be like a pagan resource out there, right? Because there's like so many for Christians that can turn to and read books that have like kind of a faith-based approach of handling it. And this was kind of the only one that was really on the market at the time. And so I bought it, and then I was reading through it, and it just did not have at all anything that I needed. I didn't finish the book at that time. I read about maybe half-ish and was like, this is literally pointless. This has nothing to do with anything I'm dealing with. And so I just put it on a shelf. And at the time I thought maybe, okay, this death is just too intense for me. It was very unexpected, and it brought up a lot that we had to deal with. Unexpected deaths when the person is not prepared to die at all and doesn't have a life insurance policy, and you haven't talked about like what you want done with your body. P.S. Have that conversation. If you have not, tell somebody. Write it down somewhere that somebody can easily find to know what to do with your body. Do you want to be cremated? Do you want a green burial? Do you want a traditional burial? You gotta tell the people what they want, what you want done. Do you have a specific cemetery you want to try to get into, or a specific vibe of a cemetery? Like, if you want your cremated remains saved forever, do you want it spread a specific space? You don't really care. Like, you gotta tell people before they're dead. We did not have that luxury. She didn't ever want to talk about it. So we kind of were left stumbling, and I was like, okay, maybe that's why. And like, you know, packing up somebody's life really rapidly because, you know, they're dead and we'd have to get them out of the apartment and sort through everything of what are we keeping, what are we not. Well, dealing with high emotions because like they just died super unexpectedly. And so, because it was just curveball after curveball and then death. And so that was a lot to process. And so I thought maybe that's why I don't like this book. Maybe that's why this book is just not it for me, because I'm just too emotional from it. And so I put it on the shelf, kind of brushed it off as that, and I was like, I'll pick it up when I'm not feeling the feelings. So then when I went through another death, my close family member the next year in 2020, it was a little different. I picked this up, I skimmed it, and I was like, there's nothing in here of what I need. And so instead I went to the rituals I had written from when my mother-in-law had passed, because I wanted rituals. I needed stuff. I needed a thing that I could just grab and tell me what to do. Give me options, but tell me what to do. Because in grief, you don't really have a brain to be doing stuff. Like, you are overwhelmed. And especially if it's a close death, you're not really gonna necessarily, some people can be, but most of us are gonna be really overwhelmed. You're not gonna feel like writing up a funeral ritual or like trying to figure out how to write all of the stuff you have to do, writing an obituary, telling family, having to constantly reiterate all of this stuff. Like, it's taxing on the just soul, body, mind, everything is just exhausted from it. So you want a book that you can just grab and go. And so this is not that book. I've mentioned this a little bit, but I think, maybe not. Maybe I haven't actually said it. I think I might have just put it as verbiage on an edited video. But somebody I'm not exactly close to, but a little affected by, my brother's mother-in-law passed away. And it was a bit unexpected. She got diagnosed not even a month ago, really. Maybe a month. Dates are like a little fuzzy, but like basically September to now she's died. The timeline just kept getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and it was just insane. It was just a rapid fire of, oh, I don't know, like something's just kind of funky going on. Oh no, you got cancer. Okay, we're gonna do this, and this is our options of what we can do. JK, you can't do any of those. You're gonna pass away in like a couple days to maybe a couple weeks. And then she dies. And that's a lot. But I was never really close to her. Didn't have anything really against her. We just, like, we never hung out. Just me and her. We would chit chat and whatever at like family get-togethers every year. Gone to Thanksgiving to her house a few times and Christmas parties and whatever. But I wasn't like, I mean, I was sad to hear of her passing, cried about it a little bit, but no, I'm okay, you know? And so I thought this is the prime time to read this book. I was already planning it. I was already planning on reading this book, but this is a good opportunity. I'm not stricken with grief, and yet it's death that's happened. And so I was hoping this book would be helpful. It super duper is not. So I've talked to my husband about this quite a bit. A lot of this book emphasizes death in very different ways than I feel like the average person experiences. So for one, a lot of this book is focused on processing what death means to you. And personally, when somebody around me dies, that's like literally the last thing that I need to be working on. I don't want to be contemplating what death is going to be like for me, other than sometimes it brings up logistics that you need to consider and maybe have those conversations. Again, when you're at a funeral and you're planning funeral and you're going through stuff, like that's a good time to tell your loved ones what you want done with your body, and you ask them what they want done. It's a conversation you really need to have. And what do you want with your belongings? And important documents of like, hey, just so you know, I have all of my stuff in this folder and it's located here, just so they know. And it's a good time to bring up that conversation. But other than that, I don't really feel like most people are wanting to be like, okay, I'm gonna visualize that I'm dead now and this is me going through all of my stuff and like leaving Earth and blah, blah, blah. I just don't feel like that's what I would ever want. I've never done that for any of the deaths I've gone through. And I've had quite a few. We've had a death of some sorts every year since at least 2017. So it's getting to be really common. Every year somebody's dying. They're just at that age group, and it just sucks that I swear like every person that I know is just like slowly dying. And it's just like, seriously, we could just pump the brakes a little bit here. Because of that, like every single death, I have never wanted to sit down and be like, oh yeah, you died? Okay, I'm gonna focus on me now and me experiencing death. But me and my husband talked about it and it was like, well, maybe like, cause we've both had experiences where we've almost died. We've already had the near-death experience. So maybe other people, this is a good time for them to like open up to that opportunity of like thinking about it. So I don't know, maybe that's like for other people, this might be a good time. I don't know. For me, it's more of like, let's process the grief that you're feeling and the loss in your life, not really focus more on death, but to each their own. So the next major qualm I have with this book is that it does not feel really accessible for the majority of people. Most people aren't death doulas. You don't want to be a death doula. And you might want to do it to some degree when your loved one's passing, but that's not going to happen every single time. Again, the most recent death, I didn't see her in her last few days, and I didn't feel like I needed to be there holding space and doing all of this elaborate pagan stuff when she was not pagan. And there really wasn't much on what to do when they're atheists, or when they're really not, like they might believe in like the Christian God, but they don't go to church every Sunday. They're not really big on it, you know? And how to comfort the loved ones that are around in a not like blatantly pagan way. And let alone when the person dies, most of us aren't gonna wanna wash the dead body. Let's just be honest. Some people, you can do that, and that is awesome if you can handle that. I super duper can't. That's way outside my spectrum of ability to process and handle and not need like 300 years of therapy to deal with. Like, I know that's way outside of my spectrum. I can't handle that. And so I don't know how many other people could handle that, really. It takes a very strong person to like look at your loved one and like wash their dead body. It's a thing. It's rough. And a lot of these deaths that they talk about in this book are very controlled. It's the end. It's very easy to handle. And like there was one that was a suicide, which obviously that the body got cleaned up because the people took it away because they have to do testing and whatever. And so it got cleaned up there. And the majority of these, it's like they died at home from like cancer or AIDS, because it was in like the late 80s, early 90s, when it was way more prevalent of a death cause. They don't really have much for the people who aren't gonna do that, who aren't gonna keep their loved one's body at home and washing it and putting the perfumes and stuff. They did mention, which was good, that if you're gonna keep the body at home, you gotta stuff areas, because you leak a lot when you're dead. There's a reason that you're kept in a freezer. and that they do certain things in funeral homes to make you look presentable. Whether you're embalmed or not, they do stuff to kind of make you not look so dead, basically. And, you know, the majority of people aren't gonna keep their loved one on dry ice in their living room. And that was really an emphasis in this book, that we're just keeping the bodies at home. And there really wasn't much for the people who don't do that. And they even went into great detail about doing a, like, at-home cremation. And I don't know that that's really legal. The last I've heard from actual people who are in the industry, because I'm morbid and I follow that, and like the best one so far is Ask a Mortician, Caitlin Doty. She is phenomenal on the topic. And I'm pretty sure she says that in America, there's only like one city in Colorado that you're allowed to have like your open pyre out at home kind of deal of a burning of a body and like not get in legal trouble. So I don't know how that's published. And like, I mean, it does say to check with your local authorities. I just don't know that, like, was that legal and got unlegal? Like, I don't know. But Caitlin, in her, I think it was in a book. I don't know that it was actually in a video. I think it was in one of her books that I listened to the audiobook for. And she goes into great detail of what the logistics of it is. There's like the little bit of like spirituality to it, but the majority of it is that you have to keep the fire at a certain temperature, and there's certain things you have to burn so that it burns hot enough to actually like do the job, and that you burn certain things, especially when like the family's around, so that it kind of helps mask the nasty smell that is a burning human body, because it's not a good smell. And so it, you know, she goes into a lot more the like logistical things of that, where this book really didn't. And it really didn't, like, it felt kind of like a shun to people who use the modern ways of a funeral home is called, they will come, they will pick up your loved one. They're usually really nice people, honestly. And they know you're at your worst point right now. They do it all day. They know. And they will take care of your loved one. And they whisk them away. They prepare the body however you've determined. Like for my mother-in-law, we didn't have them do any of the embalming or, you know, anything. Just kind of make her look semi-nice, please. And that was about it. And they did a really fantastic job. But there's just certain things that you have to do. And then, you know, like we've had family members who pass away and are cremated. And so, you know, you just have a quick viewing and then they're whisked away. There's nothing in this book of rituals or meditations or anything to kind of help you cope, knowing that at some point in the next few days, because usually they don't give you a specific time per se. I think some crematories you can go and like you can hit the button to start it, like to start the machine, which is kind of interesting. We didn't do that, but I mean, that's like an option. It feels kind of weird to be like, okay, gonna set you on fire now. But it's a thing that some will allow you to do. And there was nothing in that realm at all in this book. And it does cover a few different topics. It talks about like abortion and miscarriages and stuff like that, and like children's deaths a little bit. And it's mostly just stories of other people going through stuff, which if that brings you comfort, great. You'll probably love this book. And again, the majority of the population has loved this book. I am the minority. This is not the book I need when I'm going through deaths. I need rituals and stuff that I can do. I feel like there's just a lot of stuff in there that needed to be separate books per se. And I think this book was really just trying to be the catch-all of anything death related, which is fine. There's just certain things like they don't really have much for, like, okay, one example is that they talk about like ritually kind of ish stuff to do, like paragraphs. Just one little paragraph per thing of like the day they die, the day after, the third day. Okay, now we're gonna do the full moon. Then we're gonna do like the full moon cycle after they've died. Then the first Sabbath after they die, which is like, interesting to consider. I just skipped right to Samhain, the Samhain after they've passed. And like a year after as well. And then like marking their death anniversary or honoring like their birthdays and stuff. Like, how do you process that? It kind of has rituals, but they're super coven based, not solitary. There's not a lot of easy ways to like make it a kind of pagan but not really pagan service. And I wish there had been some kind of resource to help you to write like an obituary and like almost an outline to guide you through, because that's been something we've struggled with multiple times over. And just little stuff like that, that again, they probably have their own system, and it does really heavily focus on you have your community around you. that's not always the case. You don't always have a group of witches around you to help you. And you might not have a lot of family around to help you either. And again, I'm the minority. So many people loved this book, so I think it's a me thing. I think it just didn't have what I personally wanted from this type of a book. Again, I'm not huge on having home funerals. If you want to, that's fine. I don't judge you for that. I just personally know that, like, me and my family, having a professional handle it makes it so much easier, because then I can come home and I have my space where, my space. I have my own little sanctuary that isn't a constant death reminder. And I can have my tools and my stuff that I need to work on me, because I'm still here, I'm still alive. I gotta get me a little okay. And I don't need to be like having that mentally knowing that I have like a dead body in my house. That's me, that's most of my family, and our friends are all kind of in the same boat. And some people would argue that it's like, well, it's the like corporate America thing and that it used to be really common, and that's fine. Yeah, that's true. I don't need to have a dead body in my living room. I don't need to be trying to do all of that by hand. And I wish this book had a little bit more for people like me and ways of coping and like trying to manage your grief to some degree. And the worst thing is that like the author, her mom, had books on the topic, so you'd think she'd have a little bit more from like the pagan perspective on it, but not really. Again, at least from what I was needing this book to be, it did not have it. Both times now. Actually 3 times. 4 times. Wow. I've picked up this book every time there's been a death, basically, and been, nope, there's nothing in here that actually is helpful and easy to get to either. Like, I don't want to have to sit here and flip around and read through various meditations that are super long and rituals that are super coven based and very heavily witchcraft when I'm trying to having to now change it to be less witchy and, you know, kind of closeted, or private ways of grieving because not everyone has a funeral. How are you going to handle that? Like, it's just not there. That is going to be it for this very rambly long review. And if you are going through a death, do reach out to people, make sure that you have the support that you need, and check out and see if there are any services that are for the living that are available through a funeral home if you're going through a funeral home. When we lost my mother-in-law, they actually had free grieving counseling available, and you could meet however many times you needed to discuss your grief with a licensed therapist. So, or counselor. I'm not exactly sure what the difference is, but it was like a trained professional that you could talk to. And so see what options you have. Death can be really hard, and so hopefully you can find a resource that's helpful for you, whether it's this book. If the pagan book helped you really well, that's awesome. I'm glad something helped you. And there's plenty of resources online of dealing with grief, and it's an ongoing process. I don't think you ever really get over grieving people. You just learn how to manage your life without that person there. Thank you to my patrons. If you would like to support me, it is patreon.com/nightwillowcrafts. Do make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I post every single day on here. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and blessed be.